What's going on YouTube? I wanted to make another video for you today, kind of explaining the basic to advanced tips for mapping and things like that, and maybe why your strategy doesn't feel like it's working, right? And I'm going to pose a question right off the rip, and then I'll kind of get into it, but something for you to think about as we get into it. If you went to the casino, okay, you had 2 hours to play, right? Babe's asleep, passed out, whatever, and you got a couple hours to play. Do you think that you would have better odds at sitting at one or two different games, craps and hold'em, let's say, or running around and playing 15 minutes at 15 different games? Do you think you would have better odds on the former or the latter, basically? So that is my question that I'm going to pose right off the rip, and then we'll kind of dive right in, okay? So to begin, I just want to start with kind of mapping basics, right? And the most important part of mapping, and that is quantity of items and map pack size. So you want as much quantity as you can get. At the very least on your maps, when you start getting into Magic Find, you can start getting it on your items, right? So all these items have increased quantity of items found. So that is the most important part of dropping items in Path of Exile, especially now. If you're farming currency and divination cards, it is completely based on quantity and has no relation to rarity whatsoever. So you don't need to stack rarity if you're looking to drop divination cards and currency. You need quantity. You just need more stuff to fall, okay? And so to begin, on your maps, you're going to start with the cartographer's chisel, right? And as you can see, this naked map, there's nothing on it. For each cartographer chisel that we add when it's a white, adds 5% item quantity to the map, right? So you can get that all the way up to 20% increased quantity just simply by putting on cartographer's chisel. So these are very, very important. Okay, so we're gonna chisel all these up to 20%, right? That's the first step always. Next, we're going to want to turn these into rares, okay? So now you have, as you see, you turn it into a rare, and that you have a varying level of quantity now. 72 quantity, 110 quantity, 85, 72, right? So, and that is based on the mods that are on it. The amount and the difficulty of the mods will add different amounts of rarity, right? Quantity, I'm sorry. So that's the first start. Okay, your next thing that you can do, and these are not all essential parts. These are just, you need to do what your build allows you to do, and we will get into that next. But next, you can corrupt them, right? And now you have there's a few different things that can happen. It can completely change the map and turn it into something else and all the mods, and sometimes it makes it unrunnable. Maybe it'll add elemental reflect, and you have an elemental build, so now you can't run this, and you just have to move it off to the side, or maybe it's a brick, or you can sell them, or whatever the case is, right? This one didn't change. 110 still has a nice quantity. On some, and then lastly, it can turn it into an unidentified rare map. When this happens, it is the same mods that was already on it. It won't add any mods. It just makes it unidentified, which then will allow you to run this sextant here, which I basically save my unidentified ones and then use this compass for increased pack size in your unidentified maps, right? So nothing crazy. These are still just as runnable, but unless you remember what the quantity on it was and what the mods on it before you corrupted it, there's no way to tell how much is actually on it, right? Unless you had an idea prior to running it or corrupting it, excuse me. And then lastly, you might hear of the 8 mods, and these are where you really get into your big juicer maps when, as you can see, this one has 124% quantity on it, 136, 121, and 101, right? So these now are your 8 mods, and these are the juiciest of the juicy, right? These are when you really get into difficult maps. They're hard to run. You're going to die most likely unless you have a very powerful or very specialized build to run them. So there's multiple levels of your map, and it's going to be different based on your build and your playstyle and your strategy, what you're going to use. Some people like to just drop an alchemy on it and just go, and they want to run as many as they possibly can and just get through them, and then that is their strategy. Some people like to juice them up, and so that maybe they take, instead of 4 minutes a map, they take 6 minutes, but the quantity is so high that it's worth taking a little bit longer. And it's on you to find that balance of what makes the most sense to you. Do you want to spend a little bit more time in a map that has a little more quantity and maybe risk a death or two? Or do you want to just power through a bunch of maps, both of which are effective and both of which will pay off eventually? You just have to play the odds, right? And that is what segues me into the very first question that I asked is, do you think you're going to be better off playing 1 or 2 games for 2 hours in a casino, or playing 15 for 15 minutes each? And the answer is, you're going to be better off sitting there playing 1 or 2 games for the duration, so you can get into the rhythm, you can understand the game a little bit better. You can start to focus, and get in the zone and all those sorts of things, right? Bopping around and trying a bunch of different games, the likelihood of you winning is just more unlikely, because you're playing smaller odds across different games, and the odds change across the different games, right? So you're playing lots of different odds lots of different times, as opposed to playing the odds on a game like craps or whatever the case is, blackjack, whatever your game might be. And it's the exact same thing with this. So if you've decided, oh, hey, I want to try to farm apothecaries, you need to know what the odds are, or at least have some, or just be prepared to find them out, right? And they say, that with fairly juiced maps, it's about 1 apothecary per 100 maps cleared. So if that's the case, right, you're going to need to probably run at least 100 maps to drop an apothecary effectively and efficiently, right? Killing all the monsters, getting through, doing all the mechanics, all that kind of stuff. If you run 50 maps and then move on to some other mechanic, you have now removed yourself from those apothecary odds and now inserted yourself into odds of another game, of another mechanic, right? So now you have started over, and now you start again, right? So all the work that you did to farm that apothecary, those 50 maps that you did, are now basically a wash, right? You didn't drop your apothecary, you moved on, you've moved on from those odds, that's it, right? So if you want to be effective and you want to drop whatever it is, your doctor, your apothecary, your lots of divines, whatever you're looking for, you have to run the strat, and you have to be prepared to just put your head down and go, and to kind of put it in perspective, this has been my strategy for about the last 3 or 4 leagues, and I've probably run, a few thousand Crimson Temples, right? I've solo leveled 2 characters to 100 doing this strat, and then other characters, my magic finds, I've run, a million maps with them as well, right? So, and again, there have been times where I've run 300 maps and not dropped an apothecary, and then this league I ran about 150 maps and I dropped 3 of them, right? So it all balances out over the course of time. So my next tip for you is to choose a strategy that is fun for you to run over and over and over and over and over. There's a multitude of ways to make currency in this game, and you can choose basically how you do it and how you optimize it. You're going to see all these videos of like, oh, like for instance mine, how I dropped a headhunter in 3 days. That was my strategy. That was how I did it. And that's how I've done it for the last few leagues. Typically it takes me 4 or 5 days with this strat. This league I got extra lucky, and it took me only 3. It was actually about 2.5 days. It was absolutely insane. But with that being said, I've double dropped an apothecary twice, right? In 4 leagues, it's happened 2 times. One, this league, it happened from a strongbox duplication. The last time it happened from a green altar divination duplication. So that's me playing the odds. What are the odds of that happening? Pretty low. But because I run this so many times, eventually the odds will be in my favor, and eventually it will pay off. The cost of an apothecary is so expensive that it is worth running a lot of maps before you get one for it still to be exponentially worth it, right? But again, you can't come in and expect to win the World Series of Poker by playing a slot for 15 minutes and then playing blackjack for 15 minutes and then playing hold'em for 15 minutes and then you just can't, right? Like, that doesn't make sense, right? You need to devote your time to the game that you want to be good at. And that is the same situation with this game. Devote your time to a situation that you want to be good at. Practice it, learn your rhythm. There is a rhythm to running Crimson Temple effectively. I personally like to run it in essentially an S, right? So that I can take full advantage of my delirium mirror before it runs out. Ideally, it doesn't, right? But that is the point that I really want to hammer home. the hardest, is choose a mechanic that is fun for you to run because you're going to run it a lot and you just need to devote your time to that mechanic for an extended period of time. And if it's, again, if an apothecary is 1 in 100, I think personally you should run about double that before you can make a true or have a true opinion on whether the strategy works. Because again, it took me a while, even with my magic find. When I made my first magic find, 5 or 6 leagues ago, I was like, this isn't very good. It doesn't feel much better. But you learn how to kind of run magic find. You learn what suits you and your playstyle and the build that you made. And then once you kind of figure it out, you're like, oh wow, this actually is insane, right? This works really well. Or, even, you may want to have a build that doesn't have magic find, that is just very powerful and very tanky and can just power through the maps over and over and over and doesn't die, so you don't waste any time with portals and all that kind of stuff. And that's what works for you. I also now want to move into another point that I want to make, is that running the juiciest of juicy maps is not always the best strategy for your build, right? So if your build is going to die a lot, or it runs really slow, or it takes a long time to kill monsters, you probably do not want to run a super juicy maps. You want to tone it down a little bit. You basically want to be in a nice middle ground where you can efficiently, effectively run the maps that you're running, right? You don't want it to be a problem. You don't want to have to use all 6 portals. Even if you have an 8 mod map, but it takes you, 10 minutes to run and you use all 6 portals, it is not going to be as effective as being able to run a map that has, 2/3 of the quantity, but you can run in 4 minutes, right? You're going to be much better off running multiple maps with lower quantity than you are running one big map with a lot of quantity that takes you forever, that you're dying, that you have to keep running around and getting all your headhunter buffs back, or your buffs, or whatever the case is. You don't want it to be difficult. You want it to be smooth, and you want it to be fast and efficient. And that's where you need to find the balance, right? Find your odds, what you want to farm, figure out what those odds are, or don't just run the map and then figure out where your doctor drops or your apothecary drops and go run that. And as a side note, Surgog made a video in the last day or two talking about kind of the tier levels of the maps based on divination cards. So maybe you just want to go find the new, or farm the new fortunate divine card, which people are making a lot of money off of. Go find out where that is, find out what the odds are, go play your odds and run the map, right? So that's about it as far as that goes. I do kind of want to finish up with just a couple more beginner tips. We kind of did a little arc here, and just as far as adding a little bit more quantity, and that is with your sextants and your scarabs, right? So if you're new to the game and you're like, what are these things people are using? So number one, as you beat the bosses, I believe you have Maven, Eater of Worlds, Searing Exarch, and Uber Elder, you get these watchstones, right? So you can take these out, and it dictates the levels of the map, right? So these are 13s, but when you put them all 4 in, every single map on the tree is a level 16. So whatever your map is, you can run it as a tier 16 red once you get all of your watchstones. The next thing is the sextants, right? Like I've already added a couple here, and these add typically more monsters or other modifiers to your map, right? So Harbinger, so this is a great one for running Harbinger. And now here's Smuggler's Cache, here's more extra monsters, and etc., right? So this is just another way that you're going to add pack size to your maps, which in turn adds quantity, right? Quantity tied to the map, sometimes your gear, depending on what you're running, and then pack size, right? So the more monsters, the better. And then another kind of layer to add on top of that is your scarabs, right? So the divination scarabs will drop more divination cards in the area, straight up. So that's just a pure quantity, essentially, for divination cards. Ambush, this adds 5 strong boxes. So that's going to add quantity from the strong box itself, but it's also going to add packs of monsters to kill that hold quantity, right? And then, or Elder or whatever. This is a side note. This is a great one early on when you're starting to farm up. And if you don't have any magic find, this is probably one of the better ones to add, is your Elder Scarab. It'll just add monsters and Elder influence to the map. So that's about it for that, guys. I just kind of wanted to touch base if you're kind of popping in as a beginner trying to get a general idea. This is kind of the final way that you're going to add quantity and pack size to your maps. But kind of this is on the tail end, less important than what you roll onto your maps and what you set your perk tree as, right? So people have a multitude of different ways to set up their perk trees. You just need to find a way that is most suitable and synergizes well with your playstyle and your build and all that kind of stuff. So that's about it for this one, guys. I kind of wanted to keep it quick and just kind of dive in and get you guys thinking. Please, if you choose a strat, you're gonna have to devote some time to it. So make sure it's something you enjoy. If you dive in and you're like, this sucks, I hate it, I don't want to play this strategy, I don't want to play the game like this, then don't, because it's not worth it. And there is another strategy that's going to suit your play style and your build that will make you an equivalent amount of currency. Yes, there are certain ones, strategies out there that are the top tier strategies that will make you the most, but the ones below that are not so far below that they aren't runnable if you have more fun doing them and you can run 100 maps or 200 maps or whatever and not feel like you're not getting anything out of it. You're still having a good time. So that's the most important part. Have a good time. At quantity, map pack size, and just good synergy. Remember, like, you're not going to win big if you spend 15 minutes at each activity at the casino, or the likelihood is much lower, right? Play the odds for the activity or for the item that you're trying to drop before you move on from it. And again, last thing I can kind of relate it to, for those of you that are heavy crafters, let's say you like to, you want to craft a bow with fractured plus 2 additional arrows, right? You have 2 options to do that. You have the option to either go buy one for 30 divine that's not linked, that's not crafted, that's nothing, or you can try to fracture your own, right? Alt spam it on there, go buy a fracturing orb. There's something like, 6 divine, something like that, 6.5 divine. I need one more shard for mine, so they're probably about 6.5 divine. And so you can do either one, right? But like they say, once you have tried to, it's a 1 in 4 chance. You have to have 4 mods. Once you have tried fracturing one item, you should now only try to fracture the remainder of the items to hit what you need. You should not go and buy one. Or do not try to fracture them on your own and just go and buy it, right? You need to make a decision and you need to play your odds. Because if, let's say, you go in and you're like, I'm going to try to fracture 2, and if it doesn't work, then I'm just going to go buy it. Well, no, there's no reason to do that, because if it's a 1 in 4 chance and you only try to fracture 2, the chances of you have a 50-50 at that point if you play the odds. The chances of you hitting are somewhat unlikely, right? You have a 50-50 chance, and then you move on, right? So you didn't even allow the odds to be in your favor. You moved on before they even kicked in, right? So you should, if you're going to try to fracture it yourself, you should try at least 4, right, before you move on, right? You should at least run through your odds before you move on to a different strategy. And it's the same thing with mapping, right? Let the odds be in your favor before you move on, and you will find that it pays off, and you will find a strategy you love, and you will find one that makes you a lot of money, and you will never move on. And that's just how it goes. I did the same thing. We're all guilty of it, being like, oh, this strategy doesn't work. Oh, this YouTuber did this, I'm going to try this. And then you don't give it a fair shake and it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, this guy's a fucking idiot. But you didn't let the odds be in your favor. You have to give it a chance before you will win. That's just the way it is. So I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you're trying to figure out what strategies to do or anything, there's a ton of videos out there. My strategy is in another video. I'll be streaming all day, all week, hopefully. So if you guys want to pop in, I stream on YouTube. You can just, click the link through my channel and I'll be on there. So that's it, guys. I hope this was helpful. There's a lot of information kind of quickly, but hopefully it kind of gives you a basis, and maybe you can come ask some questions in the stream or something like that if it's helpful. So appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.